Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Two Stewards Show. It's Feet Up Friday. Brent's got his feet on the desk, and he's relaxed and chill, and we're ready to go. So
it's
today,
also the 1st of September when we're recording this, which is Rent Day.
Rent Day, yeah.
So,
is all your rent in, Brent?
Not
Do
yet,
you know?
no. It's just,
Okay.
it's early in the day.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
see. But for a landlord,
Yeah.
the 1st of the month is usually a good time. Usually the 2nd or 3rd of the month is when you're paying the mortgage and you're like, oh
right.
man, there goes all the rent.
All that money's in. You're like, woo, look at me.
Yeah, and then it all goes right back out.
Yeah, that's how she goes.
But
So today we'll talk about energy efficiency. And I mean, we're going to go a little bit deeper than that. But we're going to talk about some energy efficiency programs. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about what's behind these energy efficiency programs.
no promises on the efficiency of our conversations or the energy levels.
Yeah, exactly. I just had some crepes, so feeling pretty good. I probably got about 20 minutes.
20
of
minutes.
High energy.
Okay, we'll let you talk for the
grapes
first
run
20
out.
minutes.
Okay, perfect. So what prompted all this was we just got a heat pump installed at our house. So we replaced...
You and your wife.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
My wife and I.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Brenton. Not me and Brent. The wife and I got our air conditioning unit, central air, replaced with a heat pump. And what prompted this was we have this skylight that leaks all the time.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. It has for most of the time that we've had the house, and I've never fixed
Yeah,
it.
skylights are
I've
bad.
Fixed everything else, not the skylight. But we're like... My wife's been on me to kind of get this done. I'm like, you don't have to remind me every 6 months.
To fix the skylight.
Like, I'll get it done, right? Yeah. Well, to replace it. It needs replacing. And so like, isn't there some sort of government program where you can get a rebate for, like, replacing your windows? And does that apply to skylights? So she went and looked into it and called somebody up. And they came out and they're like, never mind the skylight. We're going to get you a new heat pump and insulation and an air sealing and all this stuff. So... There's
So you fell for it.
We fell for it.
Yeah.
The so periodically there are.
Did you get your skylight fixed?
No. I got to do that yet, and we
But
still
you
haven't.
did buy a heat pump.
Yeah, I'm distracted.
Okay.
I still
Now
haven't
you're
figured out
telling
if skylight qualifies for the for the rebate. Either way, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
I'm sick of having a shower in my kitchen. But yeah, so there are different programs. Some kind of stick around and some come and go by various governments. So we're in Ontario, so we're talking about the Ontario Energy Rebates. And you know what? I can just pull this up for a second. So the company that we talked to said, hey, there's a whole bunch of rebates that you could get. And
which one is this? This
gas.
is because there's a couple different ones, right?
Yeah, so this one is Ontario.
Yeah.
And for Enbridge gas.
So if you're not in Ontario listening to
Customers.
this, you're missing out because there's free money to be had here.
Well, is it free? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But
No such thing as
there's
free
money anyways.
Okay.
But yeah, so you can get for improving your home insulation up to 10 grand in rebates, 1,300 for air sealing, 7,800 for space and water heating, 5 grand for solar, 600 for the initial assessment for the audit, up to $325 per window. So the better window you get, I think the higher the rebate.
Right.
Smart thermostats, weatherproofing. So we had some of this stuff done. We had the insulation improved in the attic and got the heat pump and right. It's a nice, like, for the company selling this, it's beautiful because, let me switch back to a camera here. The government is subsidizing this, so it makes it a much easier sale. And
Because the true cost is not borne by the customer. It's just
exactly
mostly covered through incentives from the government.
Yeah, a good part of it.
Which is not free money, but it comes from, they steal it from other people? Where do they get that money? Was that a different conversation altogether?
Yeah, that is. We've talked about it. There's, well, and they're not even taking it from tax revenues at this point, right? They're just creating it out of thin air, so we're increasing the money supply through these rebates. But that's another story, right? So the nice thing about this program is that it also works for not your primary residence.
Right.
Right. A lot of these previously have been just for your primary residence, but this one now applies to, and I mean, it changes every year, right? But this one also is for if you own a rental property. So if, the majority of folks that I've talked to that have used this has been kind of when it was time to get new stuff anyways, to either replace the furnace or the AC.
So wait, okay, just break us down. So how does the program work? Because I've done programs as well with some of our renovations, most of our renovations, to be honest.
Yeah.
But how, in your case, how did this program kind of work?
Yeah, so this one, they're really pushing the heat pumps.
Okay.
Right. So you've got, well, because the window things has been around for forever, and the insulation and some of that stuff, right? We also got some cameras out of the deal. I'm still trying to figure out how that was part of the...
It's so efficient, though. Man.
Yeah, what that...
So wait, okay, back it up, and I'm going to ask my question a different way. So how does this work?
Okay, so I'll tell you what we did with this company, right? Yeah. So they come in, they look at your energy usage, look at your bills, current energy use, like your bills, basically, right? Say, what's your bills? Okay, here's what it is projected to be with the new equipment, in this case, a heat pump.
Yeah.
And then here is also the cost to finance this whole thing. So you're not paying up front. We'll offer you a nice financing package, which for them is great because they get to sell that financing package to a third party.
So they're making money.
They're making money there, and they're also getting their money immediately, which as a contractor, like, you want that, right?
So Mark now sells heat pumps.
I'm working on it.
Message us at hello@twostewards.ca if you'd like to get a heat pump installed.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's a good sales process. They show you, and like, you will save money. And like, we research it, like, yes, people are saving money because heat pumps are much more efficient than a central air unit and a furnace. And a heat pump will do both, although in this case we kept the furnace because heat pumps will work to
Are they more expensive
-15,
to install?
-20,
Okay.
than a standard, not than an AC and a furnace.
Right.
But
they do both.
Yeah, they do both. But, in Canada, you want probably a secondary source of heat. So we kept that natural gas furnace, and which kind of defeats the purpose of the plan, but we'll be using it a lot less. Right. We use less electricity and less natural gas for the furnace, right up to -15 or -20 is when you want that furnace to kick in. So especially for places with more temperate climates, heat pumps are excellent, right? They're just a lot more energy efficient. So that's the deal, right? And then the consumer gets a rebate from the government. So whether you've paid in cash or whether you've financed it, you get X amount. And, in this case, they're going up to, I think, 10 grand or something is sort of the cap when you're doing all this stuff. So, good deal, right? You either use that 10 grand to pay down some of the cost of the program, the equipment that you've gotten, or use it to pay your increasing variable rate mortgage. One of the two. But that's kind of the pitch behind that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of does. Like, so I've worked through the process on the. We use a company called ENERGY. Yeah. And
it's not just a guy?
No, he's an energetic guy.
Okay.
He runs around like crazy. You should see him. But they weren't pushing the heat pumps at the time. But so, and this is important for investors, right? Because homeowners can take advantage of it as well. But if you're an investor, and a lot of the people we work with, we're intensifying the property. So we talked about that in the past, right? We're adding dwelling units
to the
property.
Is that intensifying?
No, that's a different thing. Yeah, okay. That's that.
Sorry, carry on.
That's I was gonna say something about homeless.
The encampments, yeah.
Or increasing the density on your dwelling. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so investors are generally adding dwelling units inside their home, right?
Sorry, I got to stop you, Brent. Oh, man. Did you know that you can't run in a campground? You can only ran.
Why?
Because it's past tense.
Oh man, it is Friday, is it not? Okay.
Anyways, carry on.
Okay.
You're talking about investors, I believe.
Yeah. So investors are generally intensifying the property, right? Because to make the numbers work on investments these days, you basically have to buy something and add dwelling units.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to break it to you, but
Single family isn't cutting it.
Yeah, in most areas, especially with the rates and the rents where they are. So if you're going to do it, you're generally going to have to do renovations.
Yep.
And those renovations obviously come at a cost, and that impacts your overall return on investment, right? So if you're spending money on a renovation, and you might go over budget, whatever happens, that impacts the bottom line at the end of the day, which impacts the return on your investment over the long term. So whatever you can do to reduce your renovation costs, obviously welcome. It's an added bonus, right? So these programs out there exist. And if you're doing a renovation, definitely do some research, figure it out. But the one we've used time and again was issued through ENERGY. I forget if I think it's a provincial grant program. It might even be similar to what you were just talking about. But the way it works is they have an energy audit or an assessment done.
Yep.
So you pay a fee to have somebody come to your home, and they basically test various aspects. They inspect the house. They test how much insulation you have in your attic, and they'll look at the age of your furnace and the type of furnace, right? Is it a high efficiency one or a medium efficiency, or is it just like no efficiency? You're just burning stuff in your house to heat it up. You get lots of money for that. But they'll hook up like a fan on your door, for example, right? And they'll seal up the house, and then they'll test, like they'll blow air into your house and test, how much resistance there is. So like, where is the air escaping? And you'll be able to tell, like, okay, my house is actually having cold air come in the winter, which is inefficient. So, and then they give you incentives based on like what kind of items you improve, right? And how much you improve. And it's relatively easy to score points and win the game. Yeah, no, but to take advantage of the grant, especially if you're already doing renovations. So a lot of people, if they're doing just like a really quick kind of paint, trim, whatever, they'll get air sealing, for example, which I think you went through the same process, but you're basically just doing caulking and paint around the windows and kind of sealing up any openings in your house to eliminate air from escaping and transferring from the outside in. So that makes it more efficient. So they maybe get like I think it was $150 or $200 like in the program I did for that.
Yep.
But the cost of a tube of caulking and an hour to go around your house caulking all the windows is pretty small compared to the grant, right?
Yeah.
Where the big ones was insulation, windows, furnace. I don't think you get upgrades for the water heater, but there might be different programs depending. Yeah. But this program was issued through Enbridge, which is a gas company. So you had to be a customer of Enbridge. And funny story, we actually had one property that wasn't. It was on electricity.
Okay.
So what we did is we bought it, and then we installed the gas line, so we were a customer, and then we applied for the program and did all our renovations, right? And the good thing we caught it, because the guy who came out basically said, like, yeah, if you're not a customer, you can't get this program. Yeah. And like, oh, we did it every time. Like, why can't we do this? But yeah, if you have to check, if you are on electricity only, you don't have a natural gas line, you're probably not a customer, so then you can't take advantage of it. But most houses these days have natural gas. Maybe that will change in the future. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
But then basically you do your renovations, and you basically get this guy back in at the end, and you pay another fee. He does another assessment. He says, okay, you improved all of these things. Now send me the receipts. So definitely track your receipts on what you spent it on. And so you have proof that, hey, you indeed did pay money to do this, and you have a certain serial number or whatever for the furnace that you can say it's a high efficiency, whatever. Yeah. And then they'll issue a rebate check that comes in the mail like 2 years later, and it's worth nothing because inflation ate it up. But it could be up to $5,000. Yeah. Especially if you're doing the furnace and like a number of windows, or like in our case, you're generally doing all the basement windows.
Yeah.
and we're kind of increasing the size of them and whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Is that similar to the program you guys?
Yeah, it's very similar. So that is useful. Yeah, if you're doing, if you're buying your first home and you're going to add a basement unit like we've talked about, or if you have an investment property and it's time to replace some of the old equipment anyways, or the windows,
but it's important to know this before you start, because you need to have that energy audit or inspection before you complete the renovations, right? Because they need to know what the state of your home was before you made all these improvements, right? Otherwise they can't calculate how much you improved it and give you the check.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the audit is to make sure that you don't already have these things that you did last year, and now you're like, I want to try and take advantage of the program.
Yeah.
So that's single family. Yeah. Now you've mentioned offline about doing multi-unit.
Yeah. So this might be a little bit over people's ability. Maybe our listeners are doing multifamily investing.
You don't know.
No, I don't know. But yeah, there is an interesting program that I think it's been around for a while. Like CMHC has offered this financing program. Yep. But recently, I think it was March 2022, a new iteration of it came out. Yeah. And it's a financing option that's available to investors that basically allows you to attain better financing if you meet certain criteria, and one of them is energy efficiency. Yeah. So that's how it kind of ties to this discussion. I know we're kind of pivoting to a little bit of the world of financing. So it's a little bit of a different topic, but energy efficiency is very important for this program. So there's kind of the link. So for people who are already confused, that's why you know what we're talking about this.
Well, I mean, there's a tie-in with all of this, right? On one hand, for us as investors, we want to be more, if you can be more energy efficient, keep the bills lower on that property, then absolutely, why wouldn't you? And just
especially
have a tighter
if you're
envelope.
as the landlord paying the bills, right? Paying the utility bills every month.
And just in general, you want to have a better property.
Yeah.
Right? So why not have better equipment, better everything in it? The move is away from natural gas, away from hydrocarbons. And that's sort of behind the scenes, right? Where the government is trying to incentivize this behavior. Yeah. Right? It's not just because they want you to have lower monthly bills, right? They want to get rid of natural gas and this other stuff. And that also applies to what you're talking about with the multi-family, 5+ units. And the easiest way to get someone to change their behavior is through their pocketbook.
Yeah. So if you can penalize somebody for doing certain things and incentivize other behaviors that you prefer. That's kind of the easiest way to influence behavior and achieve. So from the government's perspective, they're trying to achieve a certain result, right? They're trying to achieve zero energy emissions by the year
2050
probably
or something.
Tomorrow they will. Right? I don't know. They sign all these agreements like the Paris, what is the one they just
Paris Hilton Accord, I think.
Yeah, Paris Hilton Accord. Is that energy efficiency?
It's not efficient at all.
No. Oh, is this the anti-government podcast?
A little bit, a little bit.
So we're talking about penalizing, incentivizing behavior. So a big way to do that, obviously, is through financing options, right? Because if you can make a very attractive financing option for investors, and you can set the criteria for obtaining that financing to be whatever you want, right? And the government has the power to do that, then you can kind of influence behavior. So the program that's out there, just so people are kind of aware, is it's issued through CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation. So it's federal funds. And it's called the MLI Select Financing program issued through CMHC. So if people want to look that up, I think we could pull it up on the screen.
Yeah, I got
have
it
this
there.
Thing here. Yeah.
MLI Select. Exciting.
So, like I said, it's kind of been around in different iterations, but this latest iteration is kind of, it basically has a grid, right? Yeah. And you have 3 categories that are the criteria that you can use to qualify for this financing. So, one of them is affordability. So that means that you want a certain percentage of the units in your building to be at a certain metric of affordability, and the government kind of has different standards for that based on, I think it's the median renter income in that area.
Yeah.
And the goal with this whole thing is to achieve, it's a point structure. So you achieve 100 points and then you get the best financing terms. So, and then so affordability is one. Accessibility is the other one.
Yeah.
So improving the accessibility of the unit by a certain percentage over the National Building Code standards or the CSA standards, whatever it is. And then the third kind of bucket or way to get this financing is through energy efficiency improvements. So can you reduce the consumption? Can you improve the performance of your energy equipment and do that over and above the National Building Code or whatever codes are in place?
Well, and interesting, the title of that part of the grid is Energy Efficiency and Greenhouse Gas Reduction over Current Performance.
Yeah.
And I think the emphasis is on the greenhouse gases, not the energy efficiency, because what do they care? Yeah. But they want to reduce, like you said, Paris Climate Accords.
Paris Hilton,
yes, the Paris Hilton Accords.
They
want to reduce greenhouse gases.
Very important that you point that out because so one of the ways that people are achieving this financing, and we'll talk about maybe touch on just like what's so good about this financing that people would want to even go through this headache to do it. Yeah. But let's just say it's attractive. So the greenhouse gas reductions. So if you put in a heat pump, it's electric. It consumes electricity. Yeah. Right. You mentioned that. So instead of putting in a conventional furnace that consumes natural gas, now all of a sudden your greenhouse gas consumption or emissions goes way down. So you can actually very easily achieve 100 points in this program just by putting in a heat pump or similar equipment, right? That uses electricity to heat rather than natural gas. So yeah, it is a little bit, I guess, misleading to say it's energy efficiency because it is also greenhouse gas reductions.
Yeah, and just a side note, I'm looking at the other categories. So one is affordability, the other one is accessibility, and from my understanding, both those are expensive to do. Yeah. And really can severely affect your cash flow, right? So in the accessibility side of things, that's like big design changes, which add costs to your
a lot of engineering, budget. A lot of construction costs.
Yeah,
to improve the accessibility.
Less available floor space.
Yeah. And your units don't necessarily rent for more.
No. Yeah, and then on the affordability side, you're really handcuffing your income. Yeah. So it's, maybe not so much on the designs on upfront, but the cash flow over the long term. So both of those are not very attractive, and I don't of the numbers, but I don't think they have had very much uptake with builders.
No, you're 100% right, because if somebody has to make basically it's a commitment, right? So if an investor has to commit to, what is it here? It's 40% of the units at 30% of the renter median renter income, right? So if you have to say, okay, well, 40% of my units are going to be at 30% of the renter income, and you have to commit to that for 10 years. Yep. That very directly impacts the profitability of your investment, right? And it's a 10-year commitment.
Well, and generally, if you're building something new, something multifamily, almost always, again, I have no figures to back this up, but almost always
you
the
always
rent.
Just wing it, don't you?
For most of my life.
Most of you.
But those numbers are going to be higher than rents in the existing area, right? So normally this is, people complain about gentrification and all this stuff, but usually new development is more expensive because it's nicer and it's new, and what it does is it brings rents up in that area. So if you think about that now, because the only way to build something nice and new is usually not to have it at the same rent as then it just doesn't pencil, right? The numbers don't work. So now basically you're committing to being unprofitable
Yeah,
for
10
however
years
many 10 years.
I think you can commit to 20 years and you get bonus points.
Okay. Again, in the States,
Yeah. We got a B in the office.
they have opportunity zones,
Yeah.
OZs, and they have massive tax breaks for doing this stuff. So it's much more attractive. I don't know.
Yeah.
If anybody from the government's listening, look at how the states does opportunity zones. But back to...
yeah, so just to circle back about the CMHC MLI Select program for
Yep.
multifamily. So it is available, it's financing available for multifamily. So it means 5 units or more.
Yeah.
So you can't do this with 4-plex. You can't do this with a duplex in whatever in your basement. You have to have 5 or more units.
Yeah.
But it does like the benefits of it is that it offers a longer amortization. We won't get into all the details here, but it offers a longer amortization up to 50 years, whereas traditional financing might be 30.
Yeah.
Right. So your monthly payments on your debt are going to be lower, which improves
A lot lower.
Yeah.
Like 50 years.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Which improves your cash flow. Right. So from an investor standpoint, that's like, whoa, okay, that's an option. Wow. Good. I really like to consider that. But it also offers, a lower rate because it's an insured mortgage, which means it's basically backed by the government, and a lender feels more comfortable lending the loan to the investor.
Yeah.
They'll offer a lower rate, so you pay a premium, like you pay an insurance premium, but you also get a lower rate.
Lower rate and longer amortization.
Yeah. And there's one other thing that I'm forgetting, which is the loan to value.
Oh, right.
Right. And so it won't get necessarily describing on what loan to value is, but you can go up to 95%, whereas traditional is 80%,
So
which
it's
means
huge. So
your money goes a lot further.
Yeah, you could put 5% down on a project.
Yeah.
And then also get, let me pull up the chart again. Also put, so you're putting less money down and you're getting much better cash flow and much better rates.
Yeah. So, and that's usually not available in traditional financing, where like you're just going out, you're getting a regular loan, you're going to put 20% down or more in some cases if it's commercial, and which requires a significant amount of capital, right?
Yeah.
But if you have the option to do 5% down, so if a lot of investors can put money in and then get a lot of it back out, right? Or most of it back out. So anyways, just from a high level, this program is really attractive. And what we see behind the curtain is that like the government is essentially incentivizing through these loan programs a certain behavior. And the main one is energy efficiency or greenhouse gas reductions.
Yeah, they call it energy efficiency.
Yeah.
But that's not really what it is.
Yeah.
It has that effect.
Well, when you read the fine
but-
print of how to qualify for it, it
Yeah.
basically points you to put a heat pump in, which is electric, instead of a furnace, which is gas.
Yeah, and electric, you can use renewables for electricity, right?
Yeah.
Like solar, like wind power, as opposed to fossil fuels, hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
Which the government is in Canada, anyways, is trying desperately to throttle. Right, one of the biggest industries and resources that we have. We're just trying to strangle.
So now, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about?
Let's talk about the government for a while, Brent.
You want to talk about climate change? You want to talk about the standard of living?
Well, so it's all
You want to talk
tied.
about the weather?
It's all tied into these, as you mentioned, right? The what we will now refer to as the Paris Hilton Accords. No, but the commitments that Canada has made towards reducing greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, right? Where to start, right?
I'm just amazed at how much basically free or free money is out there, right?
Yeah, well, it's an unlimited
You
amount.
get grants to put a heat pump in your house.
Yep.
I get grants to change my furnace.
It's
And
like Oprah, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car.
Oprah and Paris Hilton. I don't know.
So the idea behind it is energy scarcity,
Right.
right? And the whole, the whole climate movement.
Yeah. Okay. Where does this whole movement or mentality come from? Like what? Because to me, it kind of seems ideological a little bit.
Yeah, it's all ideal.
Because if you're incentivizing
ideology.
something, it must be that you believe in it, and that.
Yeah, there's no economic benefit for the government to get us off of natural gas,
yeah,
right?
because if the free market could choose the energy that it wanted to use and whatever,
yep.
would it choose the one that you're pushing?
No.
It might not, right?
I don't think so. Not in Canada, right? We have certain things that are plentiful in Canada. So hydroelectricity from dams, from water, like we got a lot of that, and that's great. We use that. It's relatively clean.
Yeah.
Right. You got to build these big dams and flood areas, but
that's why we call it hydro.
Exactly.
Because we have so much hydroelectric power.
It's funny until you go to a different part of the world and you talk about your hydro, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" Right? But yeah, that's what that's about. But yeah, so we have lots of water power in certain areas, and then we have also lots of hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
So natural gas, oil, all these things, which we've been doing our best, like I said, to strangle these industries and to really reduce our dependence on them. So yeah, the idea is that greenhouse gases it's the whole climate argument, right? And it changes over time. I think you can see where I am on this side of what they call climate change. It used to be global warming. That really didn't work out, so now they call it climate change. And one of the central tenets of that religion is to reduce greenhouse gases, to reduce the use of fossil fuels.
Yeah. So
you can go back a little bit to like the 70s and the 80s. You got this fella, Paul Ehrlich, and EHRLICH, if you're going to Google it. And, he had this theory about peak oil. Right, and this caused, it wasn't just him, but he was one of the proponents, right? This caused energy scare.
I'm pretty confident people don't know about this.
Some people might.
Yeah?
Some people might not.
If you're my age, you probably don't know about this. If you're your age, shoot, it's like old hat.
Yeah, we were more worried about, running out of dinosaurs to ride to work.
All I see on Google is Ehrlich Pest Control. So if you're out there from Ehrlich Pest Control.
Okay, no, they're doing a good job. Keep getting rid of those pests. But no, but there was a theory about peak oil, right?
Okay.
As oil usage increased and was being used for a lot of stuff, people were like, it's going to run out, right? We're using so much more than we ever have. And oil, in specific, oil is going to run out, and we need to change our consumption and all this stuff.
Because oil doesn't just naturally, it's not like solar.
It's not a renewable, that's where we get the term renewable resources.
It doesn't naturally occur.
It does naturally occur.
Not within our lifetimes. It's not going to spontaneously appear.
Yeah. So
that's my technical
the interesting thing is that we are constantly finding new and more oil reserves all over the world, and so much so that we probably could never use all of it up. But anyways, the push is against fossil fuels. Peak oil was like, we're going to run out. Yeah. And massive hysteria at the time.
It's kind of a prophecy, right? Like
a little bit, yeah. And exactly.
In this amount of time, we're going to run out of oil.
So this fella, Paul Ehrlich, had a bet with another fella, last name is Simon. And the bet was that, let's pick 5 commodities. And Ehrlich said, well, because we're running out of everything, not just oil, everything is going to become more expensive as it becomes more scarce. And this fella, Simon, said, no, there's so much more resources than we know we have. And human ingenuity and engineering will be able to find more of it and to use it more efficiently as well. So anyways, over 10 years, Ehrlich lost the bet because of the 5 commodities that they looked at. I think 3 of them had actually decreased nominal. So if it was $5 in 1980, it was $4 in 1990. And then the other 2 decreased inflation adjusted. Right. So he lost that bet. But this is one of the theories. So you can go back further. We can talk about Thomas Malthus and Malthusian economics. And there is sort of a point to all this, folks. But
yeah, well, because just to talk about Ehrlich and Simon for example, so just to put the point home, like the one guy thought that energy on this earth was scarce.
Yeah.
And it was finite and it was limited and there could be no more. And that the problem was that human beings kind of represent they're the problem, right? Because they're consuming the energy. And so we kind of need to manage our energy consumption and reduce it as much as possible, right?
Yeah. So, that was the theory. So now...
And it proved to be wrong.
It proved to be wrong. And we have, I talked about sort of the religion of climate change and, what is sort of behind a lot of this, just moving forward to our present time now, right, is sort of this theory of Gaia, of Mother Earth, and of that natural balance. And basically, a lot of people are coming out and saying it, like there are too many people on the planet.
Yeah.
Right?
What?
Yeah. Well, exactly, right? So
Come
we
to Canada,
should...
there's a lot.
we're taking people. Come on. But that's the idea. And this ties into stewardship, right? How we deal with the earth.
Yeah.
Not exactly real estate investing, but it does apply to to the rebates we get. But just so people have an understanding of where all this is coming from, and then they can make their own decisions based on that. So we have the idea that humans are basically parasitical.
Which means they feed on something.
Yeah. Right. That is sort of the idea, right? We need to reestablish.
Well, and where did that come from?
Well, this has developed over time, but and I'll get into that.
Okay.
But the idea is that we're parasites, and I've heard the number like 500 million people on the planet is the right number.
And right now
we have 8 billion people.
Ooh.
So what about the other 7.5 billion people, right?
Yeah.
What do you And so there's sort of, I don't know, there's something unspoken there, right? Like, what do you want to do with these people, right? Yeah. What are you going to tell the Nigeria, whose population is increasing,
very rapidly,
exponentially almost, right? And interestingly enough, right, Western world population is declining. Birth rates are super low. So then, who's causing the increase? Well, Africa, Asia, right? Some of these areas, right? So, I don't know. People talk about colonialism and racism. Like, what are we looking at here, guys? Is this not just...
Yeah.
I don't... At its worst, you could say this is just racism. But anyways, getting back to it, we're talking about energy scarcity and human population and, like, where does this come from? So let's go back to Malthus.
Yeah, it appears to be driven by an ideology, right?
Yeah, it's totally ideologically
and you're
driven.
Saying that stems from Malthus.
Well,
who was Malthus?
It goes back a lot further.
Yeah.
But so Reverend Thomas Malthus was he was a minister. Yeah, he was a minister and an economist. This is when you could do both of those things.
Yeah.
Right. So I think 1798 he came out with a paper. I can't remember the name of it, but basically he had this theory that human population grows more rapidly than the food supply until famines, war, or disease reduce the population. So it's this idea that there is a natural balance and that humans, the human population will swing in accordance with this balance, right? So he was wrong, obviously, because he couldn't foresee a world with 8 billion people in it. Like he would have, his theory, if it held true, would have maintained the population at, in the hundreds of millions probably. So he didn't take into account that there is not the scarcity that we think there is, and human ingenuity, right?
Yeah.
Using crop rotation, fertilizers, all this stuff to increase crop yields to feed all these people. But this was a popular theory. It still is a popular theory. And so the underlying idea behind it is that there should be a balance and that this is a good and natural thing. And that if we upset the balance...
A balance between how many people are on the planet.
Yeah. And what the planet can sustain.
And what kind of resources.
He didn't put it in those words, but this is what it's become. And again, this sort of Mother Earth worship that we're upsetting the balance, right?
Yeah.
So you can go back maybe a little bit further to like Rousseau and his idea of the noble savage, which was that you could have these populations that lived in unity with nature. And that was a good and a beautiful thing. And there's a whole bunch of other implications with the noble savage theory.
Okay,
but
we have to do a whole series on this, or
yeah, but no, very paternalistic and very like looking down on people, right? As the sort of the European looking at this. And he idealized this sort of life. So you would have like, you know, the Indian population of the Americas, for example, like Aboriginals, right? And how that's, and we have repercussions of that today, right? Like that's how we should get back to nature and being one with the earth and trapping and maybe not hunting because that kills animals, but you know, whatever, like, you know, harvesting herbs. And
that's where the ideology kind of
you go back. So you kind of have an understanding of this and, you know, look it up, right? Rousseau, he was pretty influential in the Enlightenment as well, a lot of his writings. You can take it back further. And I've heard this comparison made, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about Elijah battling the prophets of Baal.
Yeah.
So Baal was a nature god. He was a god of weather, especially.
Yeah.
And the idea is that if you wanted things to go well for you as far as weather goes, you had to sacrifice something, right? You would make sacrifices to Baal. And Elijah kind of put this like, no, he is not a god. You worship one, you know, the only God, the God of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Yahweh. And, you know, look up the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal, but it didn't work out for those prophets of Baal. But what we're seeing, I think, is another iteration of Baal worship where we're worshiping, and there's just such a strong urge for humans to worship the earth. To look at, you know, a weather phenomenon and to explain it in a religious way, which I think is what we're seeing today. It's not couched in religious, upfront in religious terms, but the ideology is religious. And you've had climate activists screaming, repent, you must repent. I'm like, that is religious language.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, there's an element of humor in that story with Elijah too, because if you're not familiar with it, so he's basically a contest, right? Elijah's on the mountaintop and the prophets of Baal are on the mountaintop, the other god, right? So there's kind of these two gods and they're like kind of face off. And well, how are we going to do this competition? Well, we're going to try and do a sacrifice, but we're not going to light it on fire because the God, who is the God of, you know, the weather or whatever, he's going to send the fire.
He's got a lightning.
Yeah.
He can do that.
So you have to rely on your God. So now you have 400 prophets of Baal calling out to their God. And what does Elijah say, right? Like, okay, maybe your God is...
Maybe he's in the bathroom, you know?
Maybe he's on a vacation. It kind of is a humorous incident in the Bible, I think, when... he makes those comments. It's the same kind of thing right now, right? Like you can look at this and you said the prophecy or whatever, the prediction of some of these guys, has kind of fallen flat and not come true. And it's kind of, in a sense, humorous too, right? It's like, well, if you're worshiping the God that you think is going to solve the problems and it's not the real God, then you're going to be sorely mistaken, right?
Yeah. And I mean, Christians can argue about... Yeah, I mean, on one level it is, on another it's quite sad. Christians can argue about climate change and science and, whether or not this is true or, how it affects us. But to me, I kind of look at it, you just have these prophets, different prophets throughout the ages. And, you had Malthus, you had Paul Ehrlich, you have Al Gore.
Yeah.
You got Greta Thunberg.
You're throwing everybody under the bus.
Well, I mean, they're all prophet. Yeah, no, not Paris Hilton. Okay.
Mark, we are going very deep on heat pumps here.
I know. No, but there's always these dire predictions that this is going to happen unless we do X.
Yeah.
And this is the latest iteration of that, the Paris climate talk and all the other talks that are happening, right? Where world leaders fly on their hydrocarbon burning jets.
Okay, I pulled a paragraph from Dr. Seyfedin Ammous. So this guy...
Dr. Zeus? What?
Dr. Zeus, yeah. Seyfedin Ammous. I don't know. We like this guy. He's an interesting guy. And he talks about Austrian economics. Anyways, I'm going to read this. So
another shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah. So in all human history, we have never run out of any single raw material or resource. And the price of virtually all resources is lower today than it was in past points in history, because our technological advancement allows us to produce them at a lower cost in terms of our time. So like that kind of, that statement about how we've never run out of anything.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of disproves the whole like scarcity of energy or resources.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying is that human ingenuity and technological advancement finds ways to harvest energy that maybe in previous generations wasn't accessible.
Yeah.
Right. And so what you find, I think, over history is that we are consuming more energy now than we ever have. And societies that are above poverty line, so flourishing societies, are consuming significant amounts of energy per capita. So each person consumes a massive amount of energy. You might think, well, okay, I don't consume that much energy. Like I just wake up, I have breakfast, and I go whatever in my car to work, and I come home, and but yeah, if you actually break it down and look at all the devices you use in your life, and the clothes you wear, and the production of your car, and how much, and you break it down per capita, how much energy consumption, you couldn't have that standard of living without consuming that much energy.
Yeah,
right?
No chance.
So, and what's funny is that you would think that there would be less energy because we're consuming so much more. But he's saying, Seyfedin is saying that, there's actually more.
Yeah.
Because it's more accessible, because we have more technologies to get it out of the ground or harvest it or, use it, convert it, whatever it is, refine it, that it's actually become cheaper and more abundant than in previous generations. And for those in the world where it hasn't, they're still in extreme poverty or very low standard of living, right?
Yeah, like access to energy, to cheap energy, is the primary driver of getting people out of poverty.
Yeah.
And this is another, another part of the sort of the world religion, I guess, right? If you're talking about a lot of these accords, right? One is to reduce poverty in the world. Well, you can't do that when you're making energy more expensive.
Yeah.
You're directly affecting the lives of billions of people on the planet, right? When Angola, for example, was applying for some loans from...
Who's Angola? Is that a country?
It's a country in Africa, right? And this is just the latest example, but they were denied loans for coal mines and coal plants because that is counter to the climate goals that we have with greenhouse gas emissions. But they were approved for some ridiculous things like solar power and wind power, right? Okay. So they're building that stuff, which has a much, much, much less of an effect on the population, and it produces much less energy than doing a bunch of coal plants. And people say, well, you can't do coal plants because they burn coal.
And they emit greenhouse gas.
Emit greenhouse, and it's bad. That's fine. Then, I don't want to have fun staying poor, Angola, I guess, right? Is what these central banks are saying to them.
You're not going to be able to raise your standard of living in that country with more expensive energy that's hard to attain, it's not consistent, it doesn't distribute well to other people, it doesn't store if you really sad.
If you really want to reduce, if your goal is to reduce poverty and reduce greenhouse gases, you need to allow this transition to coal and to some of these other things before they get to better, denser sources of energy, because then there's, you're stifling human ingenuity, you're stifling technological development to maybe make burning coal cleaner.
Yeah.
Right? All these things. And all we're seeing is coal usage, coal burning across the world is up. Yeah. Right? Australia is a net exporter of coal. They can't burn coal in Australia, but they're fine with exporting it to China, where their new coal power plants are popping up every week.
Yeah.
Right. So like, what are you guys actually trying to achieve here? Right. If you increase the standard of living for everybody, more technological advancement, it will be better for everybody. But this goes a little bit back to Malthus where, we're going to restrict energy availability, which will have the effect of not increasing populations as quickly or decreasing populations worldwide. And mainly, again, it's in Africa, it's in Asia. So like, sorry guys, but here in the Western world, we know what's good for you. And what it is for you to have a smaller population because you're causing problems on this earth. And
can I read another SAFE quote? It's really interesting.
You can always read quotes from
just
SAFE.
a quick one here. So one of the most common misconceptions about energy is that it is scarce or limited. So I don't know. You think that's pretty common? That people think it's okay. So it says in the popular imagination, the Earth has a limited supply of energy that humans consume whenever they heat or move anything. This scarcity perspective views energy consumption as a bad thing because anything that consumes energy depletes our planet's finite supplies of energy. So do you agree with that? That's a common perspective on energy?
I think it's taken for granted, isn't it?
That like if you
There's
consume
limited
energy,
resources
you are
on
bad.
the Earth.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yep.
Yeah. So, and he says reality is very different. The total amount of energy resources available for humans to exploit is practically infinite and beyond our ability to even quantify, let alone consume. So I'm just reading off his website here.
Yep.
But he makes one example of that is that the Earth the sun. Just energy that comes from the sun alone,
which will run out eventually, by the way.
Yeah.
Carry on.
The sun showers the Earth with 3,850,000 exajoules of energy every year. That is more than 7,000 times the amount of energy humans consume every year. So, just to give a little bit of perspective of how much energy there is, it's hard to quantify. It's infinite, or it's impossible to quantify.
Yeah.
It's just how do humans harvest the energy, right? And how much time and energy do they spend harvesting it? Harvesting energy. I guess the scarce resource here is time, right? And that's what he hones in on, is that we only have so many days on this earth.
Yeah.
So what are you going to spend your time doing? Harvesting energy that is going to produce less energy for you, or harvesting energy that's going to produce more, right? And if you think it's scarce and limited, I can see that you would want to limit energy consumption. Yeah. And that requires modifying your standard of living, right? Because we talked about like every device in your home is powered by energy, and if you reduce your energy consumption, well, you're going to have to eliminate something.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to start going back to washing your clothes by hand, right? Which kind of goes backwards into poverty, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Like a lower standard of living and
absolutely
quality of life.
So, I mean, if you really have a heart for the poor, you can't reduce energy availability or usage, right? You need to increase that availability. And,
all right, do you want to end it there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is maybe a little bit more controversial, not exactly related to real estate, but
we're going really deep on heat pumps because I don't know. You had to
geothermal goes skylight. Deep, we go deeper.
Yeah, you had to replace your skylight, and now we're talking about.
Yeah, but I think it's important to understand the reasoning, the ideology behind a lot of this stuff, and maybe not directly tied to what we're talking about, but I think. Even from a macroeconomic perspective, you want to have a broad view of all the issues at play so you can make informed decisions about what you're going to do.
So if you're getting an energy grant to renovate your house, now you know that it's actually stems from a theory rooted in Baal worship.
There you go. So
let's go way back.
Maybe think about it.
But definitely keep an eye out for how the subsidies and incentives are, or what they're subsidizing or what they're incentivizing. What kind of behaviors do they want you to do? And that's some takeaways too, right? Because there's opportunities here for investors. Obviously, even if you don't necessarily agree with what's being subsidized or incentivized, it's good to be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we should wrap there, Brent.
Yeah.
And hopefully you all enjoyed that little bit of a different episode. But we will see you next time. And until then,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
and if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.